30 seconds before we really get started. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I'm just going to give it maybe 20, 30 more seconds to let people trickle in here. And as a reminder, as you're coming in, to please mute yourself. All right, well, we will go ahead and get started here. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. My name is Will McCurry. I'm a Senior Technical Program Officer with NARUC, and this is the meeting of the NASEO-NARUC Microgrid State Working Group. We're delighted today to have Miguel Heleno, research scientist in the Energy Storage and Distributed Resources Division at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, here with us today. He currently leads the grid planning and economics team at the Grid Integration Group and coordinates the LBNL participation in the microgrid R&D and the advanced grid modeling programs with the DOE Office of Electricity. Today's webinar, Miguel is going to detail his work with Repair, which is a grid planning tool that optimizes utility investments by considering risks associated with routine failures and extreme events. We're excited to hear more about this project that you're working on, Miguel. And I will turn things over to you, and I believe you're piloting the slides today. So take it away. Oh, and sorry, one quick thing. Thank you to the DOE Office of Electricity for support to make this webinar possible. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Can you hear me well? Okay, great. Thank you, Will. Yes, so this is this project is called the Risk Controlled Expansion Planning with Distributed Resources. Repair is an acronym here, and it is a project sponsored by the Advanced Grid Modeling and the Microgrid R&D programs from the Office of Electricity. And this is a project led by Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. The project actually, so this R&D phase of the project ended in October now, after 3 years of project development, and it was a project where we has like an R&D part and a demonstration part where we worked with the Commonwealth Edison in Chicago to showcase some of our features of this model. So what I'm going to be showing here today is an overview of the project, what were the main achievements, and also show a little bit of the demonstration we did. This is the LBNL project team, so it's probably a couple of names you might know here: Alex Moreira, Joe Edo, all people that have been working on grid planning, and there's also people from the Commonwealth Edison that helped in this project as well. So just a quick summary of the project. What is Repair and what was the objective of the project? The objective was to optimize utility investments in power grid assets to accommodate risk considerations regarding high impact, low probability events. So what is the optimal way or optimal economic way of planning a distribution system against the uncertainty and against the risk of extreme events? That is one possibility. or one of the aspects. The other aspect was exactly to establish or try to establish what a cost versus risk decision support could be in those cases, knowing that we cannot protect our system against anything that can happen. We're going to pass to a phase or to a paradigm where we'll be, every security investment will have a cost, and it's going to be always like a cost versus risk option in terms of grid planning. And we believe that this risk conversation is very important as extreme events become more frequent and more impactful. So having a conversation between regulators and utilities around those risks is very important to help approve projects, help understand which projects are more effective, which technologies can be more effective. And when we look at this grid here, and this is just a highlight of one of our results, and I'm just showing this in the first slide, is the reason I'm showing this is just to get an idea of what type of results we get. So for a particular grid, saying like a system like this one here, we're going to have multiple possibilities of investments. For example, reconnecting the grid through like different alternatives and backfeeding of some of these nodes. Here in the bottom, we can come up with like new storage investments, even investments in distributed generation and microgrid formations. And when we have different policies of risk, so if you have a risk neutral here, which is basically we don't care much about what can happen in the worst cases, we have certain investments and certain technologies. So when we have when we increase the risk aversion, so when we want to be more risk aware in our investments, there is going to be an extra cost associated to it, and maybe different technologies. So in this case, what we see is like the presence of batteries as an optimal solution for the grid will increase when our risk policy is a little bit more aggressive. And this difference of costs can be a risk aversion cost or a risk aversion policy cost that is associated. So you can see a risk premium for the grid. So pretty much what this project was trying to do is to build the analytical framework to inform this planning process, and I'm going to go a little bit into detail in this presentation. First, a little bit of a definition here. What it means resilience, what it means reliability. So when you have a distribution network, there's a lot of options for investments. So we have, you can have line reinforcement, new lines, backfeeding, new connections to a substation, reinforcement of substations. You can have storage and microgrids deployment. You can have things like voltage regulation or other type of assets. And when we plan this with the objective of with a reliability objective, we are usually looking at things that can happen. And we organize them in terms of scenarios, and the scenarios have a probability of occurrence. So, and then there is an energy not supplied, or customers not supplied, or some energy that is not delivered to the consumers. And those, when you look at the expected value of this curve, normally we come up with indices that have to do with routine failures and routine aspects of the outages that are captured by metrics like the SAIFI and SAIDI, like typical reliability metrics. So when we look at the expected value of this this curve, we are capturing the reliability metrics. When we look at the tail distribution, so this is where the events that are very impactful, so they take a significant part of your consumers out, but they are very rare, so that probability is very low. This is where the extreme events are. So this is the tail of the distribution, and according to the definition of this project, we define resilience as the ability to control this curve. And the key aspect of this presentation, and I think it's relatively easy to understand, is when you is the definition of risk, right? When you have when you're risk is not only looking at the expected value of what can go wrong, it's looking at what are the worst case scenarios. So to capture this tail, we have things like the value at risk or the conditional value at risk, very used normally in financial mathematics, or for example, stock options and things like that, where you hedge. When you hedge investments, what they're trying to do is to capture this risk. So in this case, we are applying the same concept, but to a security risk, right? We have things that can go wrong, the high impact low probability events. So what are the solutions, the technology solutions that can help us hedge against what can go wrong and how to quantify that? So this is I'm not going to details of the methodology of the repair, but I'm going to give you like an overview of what it does in mathematical terms. So we have what we are trying to minimize is a cost function that includes investment costs of the distribution grid, operation costs, and loss of load costs. So if you are familiar with other LBNL tools, like the ICE calculator, for example, is where you can find an economic value for the loss of load. And so we take this value of loss of load here, and depending on the different scenarios of loss of load, of things that can happen, we can construct a function where we have the expected value of those costs of loss of load and the conditional value at risk of those costs of loss of load. So basically, this part of the function here, the expected value, is where we're looking at the reliability aspects, where the resilience is given by the CVAR, the conditional value at risk, the tail that I showed you on the previous slide. So what you're trying to minimize is to minimize, on one hand, the expected costs, and on the other hand, the CVAR, the tail of that distribution. And here we use a parameter, which is a lambda here. This lambda parameter, it's a risk aversion parameter. So when this is a parameter, can be between 0 and 1. So when this parameter is 0, we are minimizing only the expected costs. We are just looking at the reliability aspects. As we increase lambda, we start caring more about the CVAR, so the risk, the tail of the distribution. So when we increase this lambda, we'll care more about the tail of the value of loss of load. And so we construct this objective function, and then we submit it to any optimization planning program, to the basically operational constraints. So this is where you have the power flow constraints or the time coupling constraints for storage, the distributed generation constraints, all of that. But the key, so this is here on this left part, is pretty standard. The main innovation of this project is, say, this objective function on the right. And I'm going to show you some demonstration of methodology in an actual grid, with an actual consumers, and in an actual, say, regulatory process. this project, this demonstration was done in collaboration with Commonwealth Edison, and we worked with the reliability program at ComEd, and this is one of their targeted feeders. So feeders that have a large number of outages over the last 3 years, and they are part of the feeders that are receiving investments, reliability investments in this case. And so this feeder has 600, almost 700 customers, and Commonwealth Edison in 2021 has proposed a few possible additions to this feeder. So these are basically new lines that tie the feeder with this adjacent feeder in green, in gray, and some little ties even within the feeder. And there was also a project for a battery in this feeder. ComEd didn't have a place for the battery yet, so we considered 3 potential places for that battery. But say this 5 set of investments, I mean this 5 new connection of lines and this battery investment was what they proposed to the regulator to be approved as a reliability investment. And actually the battery was not approved. The other 4 were. And so the objective here is to use this example and to understand when some of these investments can be relevant, and what are the cost effectiveness of each of these investments, and what are the impacts of each of these investments when we let repair to choose what are the best options. So we took the ComEd from their case. We took all the costs of these investments. So here they have, just as an example of lines, we have $160,000 per mile for the line connections. We also took 22 years of historic failures of ComEd to model into repair, and so here we have like a description of the failures. So this is the number of years between failures in the same component. So here we have an average of or most of them are above 20, so which is good. This is the average duration of their failures. So as you can see, most of failures are short duration. They are here. Of course, there is one big duration, a few durations of one above 40 and one above 60, and I'm gonna go into more details. But this is like rare events or extreme events, things that happen over the last 22 years that were very impactful. But in general, the average failure duration is approximately 4 hours. So let's take a look at the critical failure. So we consider these 3 critical failures. One is a 3-hour duration critical failure. So it's not, the duration is not the main aspect here, is that there is 2 simultaneous failures that lasted 3 hours. And that took a significant portion. Is here in the north part of the feeder that took 2 of these circuits at the same time. The second failure, a big failure, it was on the feeder head. So it was just for 1 hour, but again, very upstream feeder that took all the network down for approximately 1 hour. And then we have a feeder, a failure. We replicated an event that was inspired, because actually the event of August 2020, that has an average of 58-hour duration. So some of these circuits more and some of the circuits less, but this is what happened basically. So This is the number of customers here that were disconnected. As you can see, multiple lines went down. So we see this so multiple failures at the same time, and very hard to repair all of them at the same time. So each of these failure has a different duration, but on average they are 58. So this was actually a huge storm. Here are some news of that from that day. And the question here is now how to invest against this event. So how would those first candidate investments that Commonwealth Edison has selected, how can they actually improve the grid in terms of cost? So here I think you can see the table, but what we have here in this slide is the results. So when we apply repair to this problem, we apply 3 levels of risk aversion. So we go to that lambda that I showed, and we consider lambda equal to 0. So basically, no consideration of resilience, just focusing on the reliability aspect, on the expected value. We consider an average policy, so lambda equal to 0.05 and lambda equal to 1. So a full consideration on the resilience. And it's very interesting to note that the results for these 3 policies change. So in the first one, we only have only three candidates were selected as optimal investments. So basically only 3 of the candidates were viable. When we increase the policy regarding risk aversion, we have actually the 5 candidates that five investments that were approved by the regulator actually being selected. And when we increase the policy to 1, so when we want to make sure we have a risk aware policy, we have the 5 investments plus a battery here being placed, 1 megawatt hour, approximately 1 megawatt hour battery being placed here in the north part of the and here you can see basically the same. So we have the risk aversion here, 0, 0.5, and 1. You can see the number of investments, the costs, the annualized cost of the storage investments, and the expected value of loss of load. So as you can see here, from the risk, this change in risk aversion doesn't change much the loss of load costs in an expected value, but it does in the conditional value at risk. So there is a big, when you look at what can happen in the worst case in terms of value of loss of load, basically here translated into a cost. When we don't consider any resilience, we have a big number, so $1 million or $1 billion almost cost of loss of load. When we increase the tail of the distribution, what can happen in the worst case is actually way less impactful. And if we increase a little bit more, we can even decrease this value. Of course, like we cannot hedge against everything, but we can significantly decrease the exposure of this system to the worst case just by increasing a little bit. So as you can see, there is each of these plans is optimal in the sense that it's a cost optimal. They just have different policies, different risk aversion policies, right? So this is where we believe there is a conversation between regulators and utilities in understanding, okay, what are the risks and which cost are we able to pay to mitigate which risks. This is, of course, a very important aspect of this methodology is what we consider as a value of loss of load. Of course, there are people that just dedicate their work studying this, how to quantify that, what is the actual value we should input in these models. The ICE calculator is a good example of that. I know they are improving the value of loss of load calculation to capture longer duration interruptions. But here what we did was to change to variate the value of loss of load and understand how does that impact the total investment costs. So what will be the optimal total investment cost to respond to that here. So as you can see, as we increase the value of loss of load, so each of the line is a different risk aversion policy. So as you can see with that, when we increase the value of loss of load, the total investment cost can be very high. So to hedge against this value of loss of load. The same thing for when we disaggregate by storage and line investments, basically. So when we value more the outages, basically we're going to have more costs, saying more investments in lines and more investments in infrastructure to hedge against what can go wrong. I think I'm gonna stop here. It's gonna and give some time for questions. This is just the project team, and a big thanks to Commonwealth Edison that gave us the opportunity to use their feeders for this project. Yeah, if you want to learn more about the project, I actually don't have the link here, but we are finalizing a website with all these materials, and I can send it to. I think it's not online today. It's going to be this week, so I can send it to Will, and he can share. Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel. We received a couple of questions in the chat while you were presenting. People are welcome to come off mute or add their own questions into the chat right now, but I will read off the ones we received in the chat already. Jim Riley asks, from earlier in your presentation, what are the risks specifically and how are they quantified? What's their relationship to SAIDI specific numbers? And also, what is their probability of their occurring? So I think this question came in during your initial feeder.
Yeah, I think this was like already kind of answered when it's one of the reasons we did this example with ComEd, because you could model other risks or other outages scenarios. So for example, this one is we just have in 22 years we have one occurrence, which is this big storm in August 2020. So here we assume this to happen once every 70 years, but we can change that assumption. So this is what it comes to, like assigning a probability to rare events. So it's hard to. It's an assumption of the model, let's say. So there are let's say that you have the very extreme events, so like this one that happens once every 70, every 50, I don't know. Maybe you can model it as something more frequent, even every 40 years. So those are the ones we cannot capture in the history of the failures, but all the others, yes, we assign the probability based on what you've seen over the last 22 years. Yes, and that's the risk. The risk is the risk of not serving the customers. And there is a distinction between the SAFE and SAIDI those are routine. So those are metrics of just observation of the past. So you just look at the past and see what happened, and therefore you classify a feeder based on what happened. This is a more forward-looking exercise. So here we look at the risk going forward. We look what we can do to prevent things to happen in the future, instead of just looking what the performance was in the past. So it's not a classic reliability exercise.
Thank you for that, Miguel. Another question we received is from Lise Trudeau in the chat. She asked if you could go to slide 16 and explain the value on slide 16 a little more. Before that, she had asked specific risks will vary depending on the nature of the utility, example, rural versus urban, and the landscape, i.e. cold, hot, coastal, etc. So I wonder if you could dive into this slide a little more.
Yes. There are two. Yeah, I think this also connects a little bit with the second part of this question. Also relates with Jim's first question, which is, so this tool, just we don't do the event modeling. So we don't have any way for them to say this is what's going to happen in terms of risk. Yes, the models, the scenarios that we input should change if you're talking about a rural feeder versus a urban feeder, if you're talking about a place where there are wildfires versus a place where there are heat waves, there's a place there are storms or high winds or whatever. So yeah, there are in fact things change according to the place. Here what we do is, once we define that set of scenarios, we capture so those scenarios have a probability, and they are not the only ones that happen. There are a lot of other things that can happen, and when we put those things in a curve, we know that each scenario has an impact, and that impact has a cost, and the cost is given by the cost of the value of loss of load, which is an economic value for each particular place of having like longer duration or electricity interruptions, electricity delivery interruption. Again, we also don't do that work. That work is what we use here is values that are given by tools like the ICE calculator at LBNL. I think it's probably like one of the best DOE tools for that purpose. Which what it tries to do is to capture exactly what are the costs per kilowatt hour of an interruption of power. So we take those costs and say, okay, given those costs, what is the optimal way to plan the system? And what we see there is like the costs of the grid, those value of loss of load costs, the conditional value at risk of the cost of loss of load. And when you see the whole distribution of what can happen, if in the worst case scenario, the grid can have that annualized cost, meaning that if you have a very bad year, a year where all the thing bad could happen, you're gonna, and if you consider those value of loss of load costs, those are these are the number, and that's exactly what you are trying to reduce, is the degree of exposure of the utility to those costs, or in other ways to those outages. I don't know if that was explicit.
We did get a follow-up question from Lisa. I wonder if you want to come off mute and ask it.
Yeah, thank you. That might be best. Just trying to clarify, by value of loss of load, is that what you mean by these last two columns, annual expected value costs and the annual CVAR costs? Are those just different subcategories of value of loss of load?
No, value of loss of load is not a cost, it's a value. It is value of loss of load is what is the value of the electricity for your consumers. And that changes depending on the economic. It's an economic exercise. It basically it depends on the activities, the sectors that are involved in each feeder, and so on. So there are putting a value per kilowatt hour of load not served is an exercise that we don't do here. This is we take this value as an input, and then with this value we calculate the cost of the grid, the cost for the utility or for the system to not to have longer interruptions or many interruptions and many outages, and so we use this value to convert outages to costs. Is it clear?
Well, just I guess I'm trying to understand what the last two columns mean.
Okay, so so those depending you can have one year you can have just a few outages, like your routine outages, and that won't be a big cost. Or you can have a lot of extreme events, and meaning that you're going to have a lot of outages, meaning that you're going to have a very high cost of, if you consider the value of loss of load. So there is what you don't have a particular cost per year. You have a distribution of costs per year, things that can happen, potential costs that can happen to a particular system. So you can look at the expected value of those costs, or you can look at the CVAR, the tail or distribution of those costs. So basically the average of the worst that can happen in those costs. And these two columns show the expected value of those costs. And the big message here is your risk aversion policy does not change much what can happen on average in your network. What it changes is what can happen in the worst case in your network. So it can happen in the CVAR, in the tail of these outages. And this is translated by this CVAR costs.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Any other questions from the audience? Please feel free to take yourself off mute or drop them in the chat.
Hi, this is Jennifer, and I apologize in advance, right? I'm new to this and am coming at this from the perspective of, the California Energy Commission that's, putting out solicitations for folks to apply to for long duration energy storage or microgrid projects, things like that. And when I first see this, it seems really like this could be a very interesting tool to help us identify, where is the need? Like, where should we be citing certain of these projects? But as I hear you talking about this data, my guess is that each utility would need to do this for, their entire system. And then, based on the data that they have. And then that whole, if we wanted a statewide view, they'd provide, every one of those utilities would provide their mapping to the Energy Commission and the CPUC and all the agencies here that would, kind of help sort through and find out where our best value for citing certain of these like storage investments might be. Am I on the right track for the utility of this tool?
I understand your question is like, yeah, if you that this type of tools need a deeper modeling of the system. In other way, for you to actually understand the resilience of electricity distribution system, you have to model the system infrastructure, what is out there, right? So I think it's going to be very hard to do that. This is basically thinking about electricity delivery or resilience to electricity delivery system. So I'm not, thinking about climate resilience through like shelters or anything.
No.
else. I'm talking just about electricity infrastructure, right?
Yes.
So for that, yes, you need to somehow capture what already, how resilient is the infrastructure now, right? Already, right? And so this is basically a combination. So it's understanding how your additional investment or additional asset or infrastructure will play out with the infrastructure that is already in place, and how can it add something as a that can edge against risk or no.
It
So
seems
yes,
like it. Yeah, okay. And so you think that how broadly available will tool end up being? Is it something that, is open source? So all the Energy Commission could say something like, hey, utilities, use this tool and, provide us information.
Yes, that's a good question. We will, so this was a R&D project. So we will have a public facing tool, but it's just a prototype so that people understand how, in a more visual way, what the tool does. But it's not supposed to be used as a public facing tool. But the code of the tool, and the source code that generated all these results and all the code, it's available online. It's open source, so any utility could model their system here if they wanted and run it by themselves.
Okay,
so
they could.
Yeah, they could.
Thank you.
Any other audience questions for Miguel? All right, Miguel, I just want to thank you for your time today and really appreciate your insights and the work you've been doing on this tool. I'd suggest that if anybody on the call is curious in getting in touch with Miguel or has any follow-up questions or feedback on the tool, please either reach out to him. There's his contact right there, or you can get in touch with me, Kira, or Kelsey, and we'll help connect you. But again, thank you, Miguel. And I think we're going to transition now to state updates from our members here. Miguel, feel free to stay on or drop off as needed. So we will ask for volunteers from any states that want to give an update on their current microgrids program or any sort of new developments at the state level that you might be interested in sharing with the rest of the group. So I'll pause and see if anybody wants to go off mic or off mute and give an update. And Kelsey notes in the chat that if anyone has any suggestions for future webinar topics under the Microgrid State Working Group, to please send those our way. Otherwise, I will turn things over to my colleague, Kira.
Thanks, Will. I just had a couple of announcements that I wanted to share with folks. First is an opportunity for public comment on the U.S. Department of Energy's microgrid program strategy. The DOE Office of Electricity put out a series, I think 7 in total, of white papers looking at different technical and policy and regulatory questions around microgrids, and they are seeking some comments from stakeholders and the public in helping to prioritize those topics so that DOE Office of Electricity can allocate funds appropriately in future years. So that opportunity was sent around to the Microgrid State Working Group listserv, and I will put the link in the chat again if anyone's interested in taking a look at those briefing papers or submitting comments. Comments are due, I believe, by November 25th, 2022. That is, I think, the day after Thanksgiving. So that's about 3 weeks away. And the other announcement that I wanted to share was just for anyone who is attending the NARUC annual meeting and education conference in New Orleans in a couple of weeks, November 13th through 16th. We have organized a tour of a microgrid located near the meeting hotel, the New Orleans Marriott, in partnership with Enchanted Rock and Walmart. So we have an RSVP form. It's open to commissioners and commission staff, as well as state energy office and state energy office staffers who might be at the NARUC meeting. So I will put the link in the chat. This tour is going to take place on Sunday, November 13th from about 2:40 to 4 o'clock p.m. Central Time, and transportation is provided. There will be staff from Walmart and Enchanted Rock to take folks through the Walmart, point out components of the microgrid and answer questions and discuss a little bit about clean energy strategy and resilience at the corporate level. So that should be an interesting tour. If you are coming to New Orleans on Sunday, please feel free to sign up. Oops, wrong link. Sorry about that.
Thanks, Kara. Encourage anyone that's attending the NARUC meeting to sign up for that tour if you're free on Sunday. Unless anyone has any final state updates, I think we will end the call about 10 minutes early. Do Kelsey or Kira, do you have any final announcements from either of you two?
No, I don't think so. Thanks everyone for joining today, and thanks to Miguel for speaking.
Nothing else. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Great. Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you.